Hi everyone, it's John Pushkar, and I'm here with another episode to try to keep you safe in the world of fuels and fired equipment. And today is an unfortunate story. I'm reacting to what just happened March 3rd of this month, 2022, at an apartment building in Silver Springs, Maryland. Now, unfortunately, this is the second apartment building natural gas explosion to happen in this small community outside of Baltimore. And coincidentally, these properties were less than 5 miles apart. So you might begin to wonder, gee whiz, are these related? Apparently they're not related, but there's something important to be learned from both incidents, and that's what I want to do for you here today. Whether you live in such a facility, you manage these kinds of properties, or you maintain facilities that have gas piping and fired equipment, I have something very valuable for you that can help save lives and maybe your own. Over the last 40 years, I've developed and led fuels and combustion equipment safety programs for the largest manufacturers in the world. Today, I'm bringing you knowledge, insights, and best practices about fired equipment and natural gas safety. Over the next few minutes, you'll get the kind of practical, real-life explanations that I've become known for. The National Transportation Safety Board has an extensive report with findings about the first incident that happened in 2016. In this incident, it was believed that a regulator vent line was not properly connected. There were apparently tests that had to be done, and when one of these tests was conducted, it's possible that one of the regulator vent lines was never properly secured to the vent piping that would have taken released gases outside to a safe place. Now, the reason the National Transportation Safety Board got involved is that this was on a service regulator, so that means it's before the meter. NTSB usually handles things that are associated with gas delivery systems up to and including the discharge flange of the meter, or wherever the custody transfer point of demarcation would occur between a gas utility and a customer. And it was deemed that this incident occurred on the utility side of the meter. I've included a link to this great report with lots of lessons learned in the comments section of this episode. And now let's take a look at this second incident less than 5 miles away that happened just a few weeks ago, March 3rd of this year.
All right, now to some new details in that apartment explosion in Silver Spring. This afternoon, we learned more about what sparked this blast and fire that did injure 14 people and destroyed an entire apartment building last week. Fire officials now are calling it an accident, confirming what 7 News on Your Side reported on Friday, that a maintenance worker cut a gas line. Our Maryland Bureau Chief Brad Bell is joining us now live with more details on this. Brad?
Yeah, and first let's update you on the human cost here. We are now told that the number of people injured held at 14. 12 have been released from the hospital. 1 person remains in critical condition. Another person remains hospitalized, but for health issues unrelated to the explosion. And yeah, the big news today, officially ruled accidental, but that doesn't mean there isn't liability.
And that also doesn't mean that there's nothing here we can learn to help you moving forward. And that's what we're going to focus on.
Montgomery County Fire Chief Scott Goldstein confirming what 7 News first reported just hours after the explosion. The gas leak, which led to the blast and fire, was caused by a maintenance man who was trying to unclog a drain and cut the gas pipe instead of the drain. Maryland law requires a licensed plumber for all plumbing work. Today, Montgomery County Executive Mark Elrich wouldn't say whether the maintenance man was licensed, but did say it was clear he didn't know what he was doing.
The management has a responsibility here to help the tenants and to help pay for the damage that was done to people's lives. This is clearly their worker who cut a pipe that they should never have touched, and they need to accept some responsibility for this.
Meanwhile, even days after the blast, survival stories continuing to emerge. Susanna, home alone with her 4-day-old baby when it happened.
So you look at that, and what an incredible miracle and gift from God that there were 14 people injured. I understand one's still in critical condition. I don't know the status. But this could have easily cost instantly many, many lives.
The whole building shook, so I knew something just wasn't right. The fire alarm went off for maybe like 5 seconds. I just grabbed 2 blankets, wrapped the baby up, and just ran out.
Today, back at Friendly Garden to try and retrieve some baby stuff and important papers, saying she isn't surprised to hear the gas leak caused by human error.
It's really just the employees that work here, whether they're licensed or not licensed to do a job, are the only ones coming inside the units to fix anything.
So the county executive said he has seen the pipes in question and they are similar looking. So before anything else, he says he's thinking about maybe somehow requiring that pipes be labeled. Gas, drain, water, that sort of thing. Now, we have reached out to the management company for Friendly Garden here, and we have not gotten any response. In Silver Spring, Brad Bell, 7 News.
Okay, Brad, thanks for that. And
And the International Fuel Gas Code does require gas lines to be marked. However, there aren't a lot of those kinds of codes that have been adopted into local ordinances or requirements. Remember, all codes and standards are minimum requirements. You can always do those if you should choose. You can do more than the minimum requirements. And many of my best practice clients, they do more than the minimum. Human error. Well, we can stop right there because we're all human, right? And this could have happened to anybody. And frankly, it's an easier mistake to make than you might expect. Consider, for example, this 1.5-inch P-trap shown to the left of my picture. A common thing found maybe under a kitchen sink. Maybe it goes through a wall. Maybe there's lots of pipes on the other side of the wall, and someone were to see the picture on the right coming out of that area. And maybe someone wasn't trained and someone wasn't licensed, and they thought this was the continuation of the P-trap drain. You can see how this can happen. Now, nothing I'm talking about in this video replaces licensing or training. I'm trying to give you some concepts here. You should check with local authorities, and if someone's supposed to be a licensed plumber to touch any of the plumbing systems, you should certainly comply with that. But there are many different types and styles of natural gas piping systems. Natural gas could be installed in copper, for example. That copper could be specially soldered. It could be press fittings like I'm showing you here. It could be very confusing. And unless you're trained and you understand, you shouldn't be cutting into any kind of piping system thinking that you know what it is. And just to give you a feel for how confusing this whole thing can be and what can go wrong, consider the incident that happened in 2017 outside of Minneapolis at the Minnehaha Academy, where the gas utility there had their own subcontractor relocating a meter that was in the basement of this school. That gentleman, who was quite experienced, again, was part of a gas company subcontracting crew, thought that a gas valve was closed when indeed it was open, and it led to this horrific incident that resulted in the catastrophic loss of 2 lives and over $30 million in damage to this facility. So happens to folks who might be a maintenance man who may or may not have a lot of training in an apartment complex, and it happens to folks who have been doing this kind of work for a while. There's a lot to know here, folks, and there's no replacement for knowledge, experience, training, and licensing. And when it comes to training, again, nothing replaces licensing, but shouldn't you at least present your people with some awareness training, some awareness information about what's happening with natural gas and fired equipment systems? I offer such modules at the Prescient Technical Services online school. There is one on safe gas piping repairs. Again, I'm not advocating that unlicensed people break the law, where licenses are required, but you should know things like you should know that NFPA 54, the National Fuel Gas Code, exists. You should know what's in this document. There's a handbook for this document, and it could teach you a lot. You should know something about isolating gas piping systems. You should know that there are 3 OSHA-approved piping isolation processes. You should know something about lubricated plug valves and ball valves and how they function and how to know if they're working correctly. This, for example, is a lubricated plug valve, and these are installed in more than 50% of services where natural gas piping systems are being isolated. Manufacturers of these valves and codes and standards require that sealant be re-injected annually to make sure these can properly function, that is, open and close, and to make sure they seal completely. I've got lots more information about these styles of valves on one of the many other episodes that I have on this YouTube channel. So what can you do to help yourself? I mentioned early on that the International Fuel Gas Code does require marking and labeling of piping systems. So here's an example of what you can do. You can identify all of your gas piping system by painting it yellow. You can buy natural gas labels. You can buy labels for all the other piping systems, and you can make sure everything is well marked and identified. Here's another thing you can do to help yourself. You can put tags on equipment that identify who to call in the case of a gas leak or an odor. In fact, in the first incident that I showed you that happened in 2016, less than 5 miles away, there had been residents complaining of gas odors. The fire department was called, but apparently they never called the gas utility. There was a room they needed to get into, a meter room. I believe the door was partway pried open. They got a little bit of a meter stuck in there, and at that particular moment, there wasn't cause for alarm. But that incident might have been avoided if the gas utility would have been called. So if that's what you want to have happen, and that is what should happen, you should have tags to identify who should be called, hung on equipment. The other thing you can do is you can explain to all residents of a facility, and maybe they're not residents, maybe they're office workers, but you can get the gas scratch and sniff cards. They're about $1 a piece. You can have a little in-service. You can take them around to people and say, hey, in case you didn't know, in case you've never experienced it, here, scratch and sniff this. This is what a natural gas leak would smell like. If you smell this, here's what we want you to do. We want you to evacuate the building. We want you to call these numbers immediately. That's something, quite frankly, that could be very valuable in an apartment complex. Not everyone has smelled a gas leak or would know what to do. Human error is a very unfortunate thing. In this episode, I've tried to get you into the mindset that we don't need to accept that. It's a human factors issue. There are things we can do to put the odds in our favor. I talked about marking piping systems. I talked about training users of a facility. I talked about training folks that operate and maintain a facility. If you get nothing more out of this episode, please pay attention to the following. Today, there are natural gas and flammable gas detectors and alarm systems available. They're becoming as commonplace as smoke detectors have been in the 70s, or as carbon monoxide detectors are today. It's the next evolution of fired equipment safety. Now, there is a standard that's being developed, NFPA 715, for natural gas and flammable gas detection and alarm systems. It's not going to mandate that these be installed, best I know at this point, but it is at least going to define how to create these systems and identify how they should be installed, operated, and maintained. It will also be mentioned in the Annex section of NFPA 54, the National Fuel Gas Code, which I'm a part of, but things in the Annex section are not mandatory. Remember, Standards and codes are minimum requirements. I say it lots in many of my episodes. So you don't have to have a standard or code to tell you to do this. You can do this, and the technology is there today. I pulled these listings off of Amazon. I'm sure your local home improvement or hardware store also has them. So if you want to do something very proactive, go out and get yourself one of these today. Install it in your home. Because you know what? At the end of the day, the life that you save, it just might be yours. Hi, it's John Pushkar. I hope you found this episode useful. If you'd like to know about more ways that I can help, you can check out my website at www.prescientts.com. There you'll find information about the Prescient Technical Services online school, my book, Fuels and Combustion System Safety, What You Don't Know Can Kill You, and also about some of the consulting projects that I've been providing to clients for the past 40 years. Things like implementing inspection and testing programs on a corporate enterprise-wide level, things like reviewing and commenting on capital equipment purchases that involve combustion equipment, and even being a legal expert if things go really wrong. Once again, thank you for attending, and remember, be safe out there. The life you save, it just might be yours.